right? Today we are going to discuss about functions as data. So I'm going to take a new file, functions as data. Let's take small letters itself as data.html, right? And functions as data.js. We'll close this one. So we have discussed such kind of. Okay, let's type HTML JS functions as data script ss is equal to js slash functions dot js, sorry, as data.js. Okay, now what I'm going to define here is, where is that? Whenever now we have seen while discussing about the function, a function can be a traditional declaration. You can declare a function as a data. We call those kind of data, or we'll call those kind of syntaxes as function literals. Okay, function literal syntax. So let's start with one. So function as data. That means we are going to store a set of instructions inside a variable. Okay, that means the whatever the code that you are going to write inside the function, that will be stored inside the variable. Generally, variables are called literals in any language. Okay, that is why this kind of syntax we call it as function literal syntax. Okay, so I'll start with the function syntax. Nothing but function as a data. So declare a variable, something like data, any kind of name you can give, and I'm going to write a function. What I can do, I'm going to write something like while whenever we are going to write a function, we need a function name, right? So for example, test. So what I'm going to do, this is actual function. I'm going to assign this function inside to this particular data. So what it will do, console dot, hey, I'm a function. Just click on this one. Okay, let's look at this one. Got. So let's run this program. I'm not getting what would be the problem. The problem is I haven't called this function. See, actually, functions. This is a function syntax. I'm going to assign all the function syntax inside this variable. Okay, so you can call the function by its name as well. See, test is not defined. That's fine. Why? Because it's no longer valid. This is now becomes data. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to make use of a data here. Okay, data, generally data is a variable. Now if I let us try to print what actually this variable holds. Okay, let us try to print it. See, it holds the code of the function. Correct, it holds the code of the function. Now whenever we call this code by using function parameter, function braces. Okay, function braces, then it is this particular, now nothing but this code is going to be executed. See, I got the response as hi, I'm a function. What I did is I simply just taken a function, I assigned the entire function code into a small variable. I don't know how much amount of memory it is going to take. See, I told you already, this is something like this is RAM memory. Okay, I told you already, every function in your JavaScript program will take separate memory other than the main block, right? This is your main program. Okay, assume, and this is my a function block. This is my function. So every function block has its own collective address. That means for entire this code, for all this code, there has a common reference error. Sorry, sorry, common reference address. Okay, so what we are going to do? We are taking a variable, something like data, and we are going to store all this code here. Okay, so what is happening here, you are going to store the code inside of this particular variable, but it's not going to fit into the variable. It might be hundreds of instructions, or thousands of instructions. How could I assign this one? Again, this has already been created. Again, I'm going to create in a separate memory, right? See here, this function takes, assume, 100 bytes of memory. If I store this in a data variable, again data variable will take 100 bytes of memory. But instead of that, what I'm going to do, instead of storing entire code, I'm just passing the address. But JavaScript is very dynamic in nature, so that it won't refer the address, but directly it will print all the code of this function. Okay, that is the advantage. Are you getting? So instead of storing the code inside this simple data variable, okay, if you do so, whatever the memory it will occupied by the function, the same memory will be occupied by the data variable. So that is not good. Okay. So instead of that, we are placing an address into this, just like a pointers in C. But in JavaScript, we don't have the pointers. But JavaScript has a different mechanism, so that uh, it will refer to this particular address indirectly. And whenever I'm trying to print this data variable, it will print all the code of this function instead of printing the address. That is the dynamic nature of the JavaScript, and that is a high, what do you call, the high level programming feature. It won't show the internal details. Okay, right? That was good. So that is why whenever, see, it has the code of the function, data variable has that code, and I'm placing, after this code, I'm placing some braces in the sense it's just a function call, right? So it will do execute all this code. That is what I'm getting. I'm a function here in this case. And one important thing we need to notice here is, there is we can write a named functions like this, as well as we can write a nameless functions. Okay, so generally in JavaScript, nameless functions are referred as anonymous functions. Is referred as anonymous functions. Anonymous means it's a kind, what do you call, it's a kind of ambiguity we have. Okay, why? Because if you don't have a name, see, if we find a person who is who doesn't have any proper profile, so might be he will be a suspect. He will be an anonymous person. Like that, if you don't have the name of the function, then definitely we refer it as an anonymous function. Okay, some kind of suspicious thing. But without function name, we can do a lot of advantages. We can make use of a lot of advantages of this of nameless functions. Okay, the first thing I want to refer in this case is, right, before going to the anonymous function, I want to refer one concept called hoisting. Okay, hoisting. No, what is a hoisting? See, what I'm going to do is just take it out. Generally, let me define a simple function with a named function, something like a test console.log. This is a test function. Okay, so in order to execute this function code, we need to call it, right? Test function. So whenever I run this program, see, this is a test function. That's good. So this particular function calling can be placed after the function or before the function declaration. Why? Because function declaration won't be matter for the JavaScript. Okay, so it's already been defined at the time of compilation. Now, whenever I refresh this, see, still I'm going to execute this one. Got it? So what I'm going to do, see, this is okay for this case. Now, what I'm going to do here, I'm just calling this function, data function. Here I just call the function. This is a traditional function. Okay, I can call the traditional function after the function declaration or before the function declaration. This is valid. Okay, let us try for this particular, what do we call, function literal syntax. Okay, now let us find whether this will works or not. Yeah, it was. Say hi my function. That means this function literal syntax is also working. Traditional function is also working. But what happens if I place this particular function invocation, before the function declaration of this function literal syntax? Okay. So what about this one? If I take this one, if I place here, this will execute, but this won't execute. Okay. So see, data is not a function, it's saying. This kind of error you can find frequently in your application. So this is one of the interview questions that you can see. Okay, so what is the reason here? Okay, we already been defined or discussed about this kind of thing in the past, like while talking about the uh, static scope and global scope. See, this is a variable, right? Okay, this is a variable. What the what the compiler will do? What the compiler will do? It will extract. Okay, it will extract all the var keyword based variables. Okay, it will extract all the var keyword based variables and defines its scope at the time of compilation, right? So what do I mean by that? So that means the existence of this particular variable do know about um, the existence of this variable was known to this compiler at the time of compilation, right? But the value inside of this particular variable will be known after it executes this instruction, right? Are you getting? So this kind of things we have seen in the static scope and the dynamic scope of variables. So you can see, let us consider this function code as a simple value 5, assume. Okay. Now, the scope, that means the existence of variable will be known to the JavaScript engine at the time of compilation, right? But the value will be known to the JavaScript engine at the time of execution only. Whenever it executes this instruction, then only it will load 5 into this particular data. Okay, so whenever we find a variable that is variable was scoped at the time of compilation, all those variables were initialized with undefined. Okay, now see, in this case, where data doesn't have the value. Now this value is assigned to this data variable. Before that, data is just a undefined value. It's not a function, right? Data is just a, now I can see that. Before that, I'm just printing this. I'm trying to print this one, data. See, I got undefined. Why? Because data value, or sorry, data variable was extracted at the time of compilation. At the time, that kind of variable has undefined value. So during this time, it's just a variable which has undefined value. At this time also, this is just a variable at the time of, during this time also, the value is undefined. Undefined. This is a value. So what is the meaning of this one? Undefined of function braces. Meaningless, right? So that is, it's throwing that data is not a function. Okay, why? Because here, until here, that is not a function, it's just a variable. But whenever we assign a code into this particular data after executing of the statement, now data has a code of function. Okay, so that particular code can be executed by placing like this. So instead of data, it will replace all this code and it will call this particular braces, and it will call that function. Okay, now this is valid. Why? Because it has a function code. So the value of this function will be assigned at the time of execution of the statement. Okay, before that, data is not a function. Data is just a variable. Got it? So that is why you are getting error. Now I'm going to remove this and refresh the. See, it's working. For the first time, it has undefined. For the second time, it has a function code. I'm able to execute it. So remember, function literal syntax to be called after definition of the function only. Okay, so in order to avoid such type of errors, what we do is we just rise up all the global variables to the top. Global variables and global functions. Now I can say this is a global variable, right? Why? Because this is outside of the function. So all the globals in the sense functions or variables should be defined at the time of the sorry to the top of the program, so that if globals are defined at the top, we call after that definition only, so we don't find such kind of errors. So this is mandatory that, okay, in order to avoid such kind of errors, we need to define such kind of things or function literal syntax at the time before calling it execution. Okay, so hoisting means rising up of all globals in the sense it can be uh, global variables and global functions. Global function means if a function is not within the function, then it's referred to global function. So rising up of all globals to the top program, then we refer it as a hoisting. Okay, so if you do so, we don't get such kind of error. Okay, this is very important question when we get into the interviews. Okay, 85% people can ask this kind of question. What is the functional literal syntax? What are the traditional syntax? What is the problem that we can find with the functional literal syntax? All these things. Okay, one second please. Okay, and the next one is of anonymous functions. Let's talk about anonymous functions. Anom fs.html. Okay, let's create one more thing. Okay, functions. Anonymous functions. Okay, so anonymous functions means those are called nameless functions. Okay, referred as nameless nameless functions. The advantage of nameless functions is one we can write with the help of anonymous functions. We can write self invoking function. Okay, we can write callback functions. We'll talk about these things. Okay, so the advantage is we can directly copy a function into a variable. At the same time, we can delete by using a delete operator as well. Okay, so we can pass. Okay, possible to pass functions as parameters to a functions. Another function. Okay, so by using anonymous function, we can pass parameters. Okay, first of all, let's talk about the self-invoking function. And by the way, one more thing I want to add. Okay, so we can write uh, functions inside an expression, okay, or inline to an expression, we can say. See, first one, let's talk about the fourth one. First of all, I want to discuss about this first. Or let's talk about the self-invoking functions. Let's call self-invoking CDI one functions. So if you do a function, it's a normal function, okay, and this is anonymous function. Hey, a self-invoking function. Okay, hey, I'm self-invoking function. So what do you mean by this? So we can self-invoking function means, okay, calling a function at the time of declaration. Okay, so just place some braces like this and put some function calling braces and try to execute this one. Now whenever I open this, press F12 on the keyboard, you should find this one. What did I place? Anonymous functions. I hope it should work. Why it's not getting? Something I did mistake somewhere. Cheers. It's printed. We are getting this one or not. Console.log of hello. No, I'm not getting this one. Why? JavaScript is not attached, I think. ANONYMOUS. It's a very oh, SRC. This is to be SRC. Wait for the function. That's nice. Still it doesn't find SRC is equal to ANONYMOUSFNS.js. That's right, right? Okay, this is placed inside this particular. Okay, open that folder. Close this one. Okay, I just want to take this anonymous function.js to outside of this function. Okay, so then I can open it. Yeah, press F12. See, I'm a self-invoking function. I didn't call this function. If you see, I didn't call this function. I'm not using any kind of function calling by placing its name, something like that, stuff like this. But I'm using such function calling at the time of declaration. This is called self-invoking function. Okay, automatically it will be called. The advantage of using this self-invoking function is we can write a function inside an expression. Okay, writing advantages of self-invoking functions. Okay, something like for example, I have variables like x comma y comma g. Okay, so I can x z is equal to x plus y. Okay, something is there. So I know the value of x is equal to 20, but in order to get the y value, what I did, x plus something, I'm going to use math dot random. There are some kind of functions are there. Okay, so x plus math dot random into 10. Okay, y is equal to y plus 19. Okay, something I'm going to do some mechanism here. Y is equal to y divided by 10. 1 second. Sorry, Andy. So I did some operations here. Let me add some more instructions here in order to get y to be calculated. Y is equal to y plus math dot pi into um, 5 into 5. I'm just calculating the y value. Assume we have such type of things are there in my program, and after that y plus math dot sine function. Might be it's there or not, I don't know. So anyway, I just use y minus minus, and finally I'm going to add this one. See, if you just look at the code, most see, just I'm performing z equal to x plus y, right? But this code, see, this is just an initialization. After that, if you have a z equal to x plus y, that will be very easy to grab or easy to understand. But in between these two statements, we have a lot of code. That means after declaration we have an expression after some time, and in the meanwhile we are doing some kind of logic related to the y calculations. Okay, so what I'm going to do, uh, all these are meant to calculate the y value, right? So what I'm going to do, I just take this y value, and instead of that I can use a self-invoking function by using anonymous functions. Okay, and place this code. 1 second. Okay, now in this case, if you look at this kind of code, now you can see it will be very easily manageable and very easily understandable. Now you can see all this code related to the y calculation that I placed inside the expression only. So if you just observe this one, z equal to x plus some code that is calculating the y value, right? In this, what you can do, return a function returning value, return y. So this entire code function call will replace by the value of y, right? So this is a better way of writing some kind of functions, writing some kind of expressions, mathematical expressions like this. Hope you understand. So that is the advantage of self-invoking function. And another advantage of self-invoking function is, I can place this one, advantages of self-invoking. Okay. So we have the first one. The second one is, okay, ify. I told you already. Ify. What do you mean ify? Okay, not this one. To to protect or to avoid the globals, to avoid the problem with globals, we use, okay, to avoid the problem with globals, we use um, ify. Ify means immediate function invocation, right? I told you already a problem with the globals that we have seen, right? And let me look at that. Where is that? While talking about the scope itself, see, I told you already about the scope. We have scope.js and scope.1. At the time, we declared a temp variable. Okay, this temp variable has 100 value, and this temp variable has 99, which are both are globals. But this was written by my team member, but this was written by me. Okay, so what happens is when I'm going to place this code inside my HTML page, what happens is, unfortunately, both are going to collide with each other. Okay, so the expected output may be changed. Okay, the way we are going to organize the code. So in this case, I should expect that this value will be 100, right? But I'm getting 99 because of this scope. Sorry. Sorry, not here. Okay, this code to be a 99, but because of set timeout function, it will execute after 2000 milliseconds. That means two seconds. So that it will it first this code executed. So the temp value will be 99. After that, this code will be executed. So temp value will change it to 100. So, but here, according to this code, I expect the value will be 99. Why? Because the temp variable is 99 and no changes has been made. So I should expect 99, but instead I'll get 100 here. So such kind of weird things that can happen inside JavaScript when you're going to use globals. So how do I protect them? So let me show that one first of all. Press F12. See, my expected value to be 99, but it's getting 100, right? See, here it would be 9, but I'm getting 100. Got it? So how do I protect this one? So what I'm going to do, this is very important thing that, of course, so many developers are going to avoid this kind of things. Why? Because they're not going to use, but actual syntactical things are, if you want to avoid the problems with the globals, you need to declare, sorry, declare an anonymous function for each and every JavaScript program. Whatever the program you have written, whatever the JavaScript file you have written, that to be separate function. Okay, something like this. Now what happens is, now you can see, now this variable is not no longer global. It's become the local to this function. but this code will execute whenever this kind of this particular page got loaded through HTML. It will immediately runs. Why? Because it's a ify self-invoking function, right? So every JavaScript module, now this is, I can say this is a one module, and this is another module that to be placed inside such self-invoking function in order to avoid the problem with the globals. Okay, this is what is called ify. So place self-invoking. Okay, now you can see that. Now my value is 99. Got it? Okay. I'm getting an exact value. Why? Because here it's a 99, and I'm getting 99 after some time also. Why? Because it's a, what I can say, this no longer collide with this kind of variable. Both are separate variables.